The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Welcome to the Fine to Fab show with Lisa Lieberman-Wang, helping women reclaim their inner peace and power, going from feeling fine to being fab, fabulous, awesome, beautiful, serving to empower you to break through the barriers that weigh you down, to live an authentic life that is healthy, happy, and free. Now, here's Lisa.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Lieberman-Wang, your trusted guide on your journey from feeling fine to being fab. I'm excited to have you here and even more excited to have our guest, Dr. Libby, join us. Before we do, I want to make sure you become an active member of our community just by texting the keyword FINE to FAB to 90210 and hitting send. You can be notified of upcoming radio shows, guests, specials, promotions, and things going on the site. Follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter at Lisa Lieberman-Wang, or visit our website at FINE to FAB. Know that this is a live show, and we're going to be excited to be sharing all kinds of information with you about the Rushing Women's Syndrome, Dr. Libby's new book, but also know by calling in to 561-422-4365 or Skyping into W4WN Radio, you'll be able to speak with us. Be sure to put it on mute when you come in because it will be live, and we want to make sure that we don't have any interruptions or in the call here. So I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Libby. Dr. Libby has been dubbed Australia's superstar of all things health and nutrition. She's a best-selling author of Accidentally Overweight, which I just love the title, as well as Rushing Women's Syndrome, which we'll be talking about today, and what I think everybody needs to get a hold of, The Real Food Chef. Dr. Libby travels the world as a keynote speaker, holds seminars, workshops as a specialist in weight loss, women's health, and optimum nutrition to audiences as large as 10,000. She combines 14 years of university, 14 years of clinical practice, and 2 decades of personal experience into her unique approach to holistic health. And you'll also find out more about her best-selling books, which both sit at number 1 and number 2 of best-selling books for health and well-being in New Zealand. Last year, Accidentally Overweight became New Zealand's second best-selling nonfiction book and selling over 27,000 copies in 12 months. So the latest book, The Real Food Chef, became the 3rd best-selling in all categories, and it's been phenomenal. Dr. Libby writes monthly for New Zealand Life, Leisure and Bridge, Groom Magazine, as well as a contributor to so many different blogs, which has over 500,000 unique viewers per month for Cora Organics blog. She regularly is featured in newspapers, magazines, TV, and if I keep going on, we'll have no time for her. She's been on the Good Morning Show, Channel 9 Today Show. Everybody knows her out there, all our Aussies, but the U.S. is going to be blessed to be able to be introduced to my friend, and I'm excited to have you here, Dr. Libby. You there, sweetheart?
Lisa, I sure am. Thank you for that incredibly kind introduction.
Well, there's so many things that you do, and there's so many other areas that we can talk about, but when we're corresponding up and back, the topic we felt was the best, and I think most people will hit any one of those as being exciting, but Rushing Women's Syndrome. And before we talk about that, I think it's so important that they find out more about you, because besides all these accolades of how great you are, tell us what made you even decide to specialize in this area. Is it for me with my challenges, it became my personal challenges became my purpose. So why don't you share a little bit about you?
I think that's always involved, isn't it? So I was raised very simply. When my grandmother would come to visit, she didn't bring chocolate. She would bring me some natural yogurt, and the big exciting thing was I got to sweeten it with some honey. So I grew up with chickens in the backyard and vegetables, and my mother was very generous in the way she taught me about nutrition. It wasn't about calories. She didn't even mention that word. She taught me that, for example, an orange gave me lots of vitamin C, and that was important for my skin and for my immune system to prevent a cold. And so I went away to university and studied it because I was incredibly passionate about it. And then just after that time, became incredibly unwell with my digestive system. And what I had been taught at university didn't solve my challenges. And very well-meaning doctors, a very well-meaning gastroenterologist told me he couldn't help me, that it was all in my mind, which it certainly wasn't, because I wasn't able to leave the house in the morning with my severe digestive system symptoms. And it was through my own research and dedication to solving my own health challenges that I came to have a very broad and what I call holistic approach to nutrition, even though I have a PhD in biochemistry. So I bring together the biochemistry, the nutritional, and then also the emotional, because I find that when you bring that three-pronged approach, you can make such an empowering difference in people's lives.
And what's so interesting is that unlike everybody else, that we grew up with grandma bringing us food like cake and candy and ice cream, yours is bringing you organic yogurt. Okay.
I'm aware of how different that is.
It is, because, I grew up with food being my comfort and my association with love. My grandmas used to give me candy, and I was always around food. So, and it's interesting to even say that you had digestive challenges eating properly. So I think that might actually surprise a lot of people as well. So you want to expand more on that?
So it's when you say eating properly, because I was trained nutritionally, I was trained by the best nutrition school in Australia, and it was the conventional wisdom at the time was that a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet was the way to eat. And so when you followed that public health information of the day, you ended up eating quite a lot of wheat, so quite a lot of bread, whole grain bread, and quite a lot of pasta, for example. And it became very clear to me over a period of time that involved some emotional stress as well with a relationship change. It became very clear to me that those wheat-based foods weren't serving me, even though I was taught in my university education that they were indeed very good for me. For me, they weren't. And it made me see that people need an individual approach to the way that they're guided to eat.
Absolutely. One size doesn't fit all, and that's why a lot of people will try a diet and it might not work for them, where one might be low carbs and somebody else is high protein, or whatever the case is. It really depends on how they respond to things, if they're insulin secretors or all those other variables come in.
That's exactly right. And when I work with women, depending on what they're wanting to achieve, you learn very quickly that there are so many factors. So in Accidentally Overweight, which was the first book I wrote, there are actually 9 factors that communicate to a human body whether we're burning fat or storing fat. So stress hormones, sex hormones, thyroid function, even emotions. So just to name a few of those 9 factors that are influencing the messages, the information that your own individual body is getting through your environment, through your perceptions, and through the foods that you're choosing.
And, why don't we touch a little bit on that first, because I know that was the first book that led you to the Rushing Women syndrome. So why don't you just give us a couple of examples of how those factors affect the overweight? Because I know stress is such a big indicator, and people also take years to put on weight, but yet they get frustrated very quickly and don't stay on any lifestyle plan very long.
Yeah, that's so true, Lisa. So at university, which is a long time ago now, but I was taught that the only thing that influenced the shape and size of a human body was what we call the calorie equation, how much we eat versus how much we move. And when you get out into the real world and start working with people one-on-one, you learn very quickly that that's not the case. So, for example, I can recall a lady who she actually lived in New Zealand, but she'd just done the New York Marathon, and she'd run between 40 and 90 miles every week for 9 months, and she had eaten incredibly well across that time. So from a calorie equation perspective, she should have actually lost weight during that training period, but the precise opposite had happened. She'd actually gained, in down under speak, 12 kilos over that time, which is quite a lot of weight. And she was very confused because the opposite should have happened. I had my own experience with this as well in the opposite way. I was a mad keen runner. While I was a university student, I would run for 2 hours, 6 to 7 days a week. I was slim, I was happy, I was healthy, but then I got my first job running a health retreat. And I had to leave home at 20 past 4 in the morning to get there in time to wake the guests up at 5:30. And by 6 a.m., we were doing Tai Chi, which is very slow movement with the arms, but you diaphragmatically breathe. My next job that day was to take the guests on what was called the easy walk, 20 minutes on flat ground. So I didn't even break a sweat. So I went from being Little Miss Runner, burning lots of calories, to Little Miss Tai Chi, waving my arms around and hardly burning any calories. And my eating remained exactly the same across across that time, but yet my clothes got looser and looser and looser, and it completely fried my brain because the opposite should have happened. And so it was actually that experience coupled with what I was seeing in some, not all, but some of my clients that led me to go back to my geeky biochemistry textbooks with the question in my mind, what leads the human body to get the message that it needs to burn fat, and what leads the human body to get the message that it needs to store fat? And I put all of those answers into accidentally overweight. So it's been incredibly insightful, is the feedback I've had from so many people since I published that book. And it's been transformational from people, whether they're overweight or whether they have eating disorders, because it helps teach you all of the different things that are influencing that, rather than feeling like you've got to exercise like a maniac and eat like a little tiny bird.
Right. And, I think one of the comments you had said somewhere, because I've read many of the things you've done, is behavior is the outermost expression of our beliefs. And a lot of times, just like the idea is you're going to exercise vigorously, you think you're going to lose weight, but it might not even be at a rate at which you're burning fat, or you're not building muscle, and muscle dictates metabolism. There's so many variables, and a lot of people want to say, well, this is the one piece. And looking at it as a whole is a big piece that people miss. We're looking at one piece, not everything.
That's exactly right. And I also believe for so many people, they don't sit down after eating in the evening and then polish off a whole packet of chocolate cookies. People don't do that thinking they're doing themselves any favors. They do it because there's emotion there, and they're looking for food to help them feel a certain way, which is what I love helping people decipher. And as you said, our behavior is the outermost expression of our beliefs, but most people are unaware of what they believe, because most people have absorbed a set of beliefs before they were old enough to talk. And for some people, they've absorbed those beliefs for people they might not even ask for street directions from today. And yet these beliefs are governing their world. So in my books, I help people decipher what those beliefs are, and then how to make changes in that area, because that's the game changer.
And when you're saying that, I think it's so important, because, with Find to Fab, it's helping women go from feeling effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional, fabulous, awesome, beautiful. And it only came because of the fact that I had spent the better part of 13 years with an eating disorder. And fortunately, the last 20 years living in abstinence from hurting myself. And so many people can never even think of food as a means of hurting themselves, because they think of it as comfort or love, or I feel better. And all the extra stuff that goes with it, that I know we're going to discuss some of it, I think is so imperative. People don't put it as being very important. I think it's some of the most important factors is how we deal with things and what it means to us. Now, with accidentally overweight, you said 9 factors. Why don't you give us like the top 3?
The top 3, without question, are stress hormones, sex hormones, and emotions.
Okay.
Every time, if that was just what I worked on with women, we get a shift.
And it's so often that you'll find a lot of people don't even equate the sex hormones with the stress.
Precisely, and it was a big reason why I then wrote Rushing Woman Syndrome, because they were the 2 really outstanding factors that I could see were making such a difference to what was going on with women, especially with their nervous system, with their digestive system, with the PMS that they're experiencing, and even then the quality of their relationships, because it can be very difficult to be calm and patient and kind, even if that's what's in your heart. It can be very difficult to behave in that way when your sex hormones are really out of balance.
Right. So why don't we start talking a little bit about how the Rushing Women Syndrome goes with that? Because I know it follows the same thread.
It certainly does. So what I started when working with women one-on-one, probably only about 7 years ago, I noticed women would just walk through the door of my practice very, very calmly, and they'd come and they'd fill in the paperwork early, and it started to change. And over the last sort of 5 years, women burst through the door of the office. They're bright red in the face. They've been rushing everywhere. They were running late and they couldn't get a car park, and there's this intensity. And I started to notice that. And when I paused to think about it, I thought, well, given that humans have been on the planet for around 150,000 years, it's a relatively short amount of time that women, not that long ago, essentially women were given the opportunity to do what had traditionally been their father's duties, but they've maintained what's traditionally been their mother's responsibilities. And so what's unfolded for so many women is a frantic double shift that swings anywhere from comedy through to chaos, depending on their perceptions. And in essence, it means that for so many women, they don't ever get to rest. There's no downtime. And for us to be our best selves, we absolutely must rest. We can't fight that aspect of our biology. We must rest. And so it was out of that observation, and then the immense health challenges that I was noticing women were experiencing because of rushing, that I wrote the book Rushing Woman Syndrome.
Right. And some of the things you talk about are so common, everything from, you mentioned PMS or PMT, but also feeling bloated. I mean, what a common denominator of people. I used to say that all the time. I feel pregnant. And it was just something I ate. And you mentioned before the wheat diet. So years later, finding out I was gluten intolerant. But that could be one of many variables, I'm sure, that people will find out what causes that. So I'm going to want you to talk a little bit about that, as well as the cravings or feeling overwhelmed. And, you know, with rushing women, we are trying to do everything and be everything to everyone. You know, telling them to slow down or to be able to take time for themselves is a denominator most will never even think is possible, because that you need to be superwoman, of course, you know. So give us some of your experience that you think is the easiest way to transition into changing some of these factors.
Absolutely. So bloating is such a big deal, and I'm actually running a Rushing Woman Syndrome online seminar on June 11, precisely around that. So I'll make sure I give you those details, Lisa, so that you can have access. It's all for free, and your listeners can have access. But it's digestive system problems, but bloating in particular is such a challenge these days. I've only got stats for Down Under. So for Australia and New Zealand women, over 70% of women now experience it every single day. So I like to say it's common, but it's not normal. And food is certainly playing a really big role in those bloated stomachs, because for a lot of people, they're eating food that is what I call not real food. I met a lady actually just on the weekend who was sick of diets. She was only 25 years old. She was sick of diets. She was sick of feeling, her words, fat and swollen and uncomfortable. So she decided no more dieting. She was just going to eat real food. And so she grabbed my Real Food Chef cookbook, and she's only eaten out of that since, so just to guide her with real food, and she's lost 40 kilos. So I must convert that into pounds so that your listeners have got a good idea of that. I'll do that shortly, but it's a huge amount of weight. She's virtually lost half her body weight just from eating real food. So very powerful. But the other thing she noticed, of course, is that her digestive system symptoms went away. So as you said, gluten, for example, can play a really big role. For other people, it can even be fruit, would you believe? So there are substances in fruit that can be that can ferment for some women, but then of course there's all the processed foods and all of the numbers and all of what I call the non-real foods that can be there. So they can all be contributing. But of course, stress is playing a really big role, and particularly for the rushing women, because one of the main stress hormones behind rushing is adrenaline. And adrenaline historically communicated to every cell in your body that your life was literally in danger. So we only ever made it when a tiger jumped out of the jungle at us, or someone from another tribe started to chase us with their spear. And in that moment we go, oh, and we're ready to fight or to get out of there. But in modern times, what leads the human body to have a lot of circulating adrenaline can be caffeine, because anytime we consume caffeine from any source, it leads the human body to make adrenaline. So that's number one. And number two, that the other component in modern times that leads us to make adrenaline is our perception of pressure. And you'll notice I put the word perception in front of the word pressure, and I've done that on purpose. For some people, even me just describing it that way will make them feel like I don't understand their life, and they'll think I have real pressure. Now, I'm not denying that doesn't exist, but hear me out. The reason I believe that pressure is a perception is because someone might approach you in your day and they'll say, oh my goodness, you won't believe what I've got going on. I'm under so much pressure. I've got this and this and this and this all going on at the same time. And your internal response to that might be, that sounds like a walk in the park compared to what I've got going on. And so for so many people, what used to be pressure and stress, it might have been, for example, that they were deeply concerned about the health of a loved one. Whereas now when I ask people what leads you to feel stressed and under a lot of pressure, they'll say, I've got 300 new emails and I don't know when I'm going to get the chance to deal with them. So I'm not denying that getting back to people isn't important. Of course it is. But I do think that technology allows us, and probably all the caffeine that so many people are fueled on today really leads them into that space where all the blood supply that is normally so fantastic to the digestive system gets diverted away from digestion. That's the job of adrenaline, is to move the blood supply that's normally so great to the digestive system to the arms and to the legs, because that's what's going to power you to get out of this supposed danger that you're in, when actually you're probably sitting at your desk, sitting at your computer, and you're relatively very safe.
Well, that's such a great analogy, because, you heard that fight or flight type syndrome, and heard all about how it affects cortisol as well. And when you're describing it that way, how many people don't even realize the caffeine they're intaking, whether it be even green teas or regular caffeines or yerba mates and all the different forms that are out there. So they're more or less can be reacting, and I'm not saying that they are, but we're going to use perception, reacting to situations versus responding.
Precisely, said perfectly. That's exactly right.
Wow.
And so it's so eye-opening I find for women. So when I speak to audiences, one of the joys for me is watching the lights go on in their eyes at the recognition that they can have such a profound impact on that swollen stomach that really messes with their psychology in the evening. Because a lot of women wake up in the morning and their stomach is very comfortable, and then by after lunch or by the evening, their tummy's very swollen. And regardless of their body shape and size, that really messes with a woman's psychology quite often, because she looks down at that swollen stomach and there's a part of her that knows that it's bloating and that she's probably eaten something, and then that it is all the stress and potentially all the caffeine that has disrupted optimum digestion. But usually it translates in her psychology to I feel fat and disgusting, and that has an enormous ripple effect, obviously, then on her own self-esteem, on her own self-worth, on the behaviour that she then displays and experiences for the rest of the evening, and even on the way she speaks to the people she loves the most in the world. It has such an enormous ripple effect.
Oh, absolutely. And I can literally see it within my clients as well, within my past as well. And it can be something as simple as, like you said, the choice of foods, or it can be, but the behavior and the ripple effect is unbelievable, because at that moment you're saying, well, I feel fat. And then all of a sudden the choice is, it doesn't matter, I already am fat anyway. And then it gets worse and worse and worse. I think a lot of times we don't realize that ripple effect can be compounding. So
very much so. I have a description that I share with women when I'm speaking, that I'll say it's the judgment you pass on yourself for having eaten the cookies that is so much worse for you than any cookie is ever going to be, because it's the judgment that you pass on yourself that then leads you to feel like you've ruined it, or that you're hopeless or pathetic, or that you've got no willpower, or whatever harsh and inaccurate self-talk you then bring upon yourself. It's that actually leads you to then remain in that space, to then continue to make lousy food choices or to harm yourself with food. But it also is incredibly disruptive to your digestive system, and then because of all of that stress, it's then enormously disrupting to our sex hormones.
Okay, so that self-talk was really big, but I want you to elaborate on on how it affects the sex hormones.
With pleasure. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So the first, to talk about sex hormones, we need to first briefly and simply explore what happens over a menstrual cycle, so that we know what an ideal scenario is, and then we can see what a far from ideal scenario is. So over a menstrual cycle, it's roughly 28 to 29 days. So day 1 is considered the first day of bleeding, day 14 is roughly ovulation, and then day 28 is roughly when a woman will menstruate again. And for the first half of the menstrual cycle, so between days 1 and 14, estrogen is the dominant sex hormone for a woman. And estrogen is a fat storage hormone. estrogen wants a menstruating female to get pregnant every single month of her life, whether that's on her agenda or not. But that's what estrogen wants. And so it has to make sure that there's some body fat there for a woman in case a conception takes place, because a woman won't know initially that she's conceived, and that brand new fetus needs support, needs nourishment from some body fat to be able to survive. So it has a very much a survival driving force behind it. But reproductively, estrogen's job is to lay the lining of the uterus down. And then for the first half of the cycle, the other sex hormone that a woman is making is called progesterone. And she's making that at this stage from her adrenal glands only. And our adrenal glands sit just on top of our kidneys. So reproductively, the job of progesterone is to hold the lining of the uterus in place. So estrogen has laid it down, and then progesterone's job is to hold it in place. But please listen to the biological impact of progesterone. It's an anti-anxiety agent, it's an antidepressant, and it's also a diuretic. So it allows women to get rid of any excess fluid. Because when we retain fluid, again, that can make us feel puffy and swollen and uncomfortable and again, really mess with that psychology. So you've got estrogen laying the lining of the uterus down, progesterone holding it there, but it's also exerting its anti-anxiety, antidepressant, and diuretic properties. However, your adrenal glands are also where you make your stress hormones from. And our two main stress hormones, I mentioned one a moment ago, is adrenaline, and the other one is cortisol. So you've got adrenaline communicating to every cell in your body that your life is in danger when you're making it, and you've got cortisol communicating to every cell in your body that there's no food left in the world. And your body links progesterone to fertility. And so the last thing your body wants is for you to bring a baby into a world where it perceives that you're not safe and where there's no food. And so your body thinks it's doing you a great big favor, but actually it's not, but it thinks it is, and it shuts off the adrenal production of progesterone, because a woman is so busy churning out her stress hormones. So that shift alone, in my opinion, is one of the biggest challenges facing women's health today, is that shift away from good adrenal production of progesterone to that production of stress hormones. That's an enormous challenge, and that's only the first half of the menstrual cycle.
Wow. Now, and you think about it, if it's not producing the progesterone and the women, that doesn't give us the antidepressants, you start getting depressed, it's not letting go of the water, you start getting bloated, you have all the other mental stuff that comes with it. And this is your body responding to what it thinks it's helping. That's scary.
That's exactly right, Lisa, because then mid-cycle we're supposed to ovulate, and it's from once an egg pops out of the ovary, a little tiny crater is left on the surface of the ovary, and it's from that place that we secrete a lovely big surge of progesterone. And by day 21 of the menstrual cycle, we ideally have about 25 units. And I've been working with women now one-on-one for 15 years. And in 15 years, I've had 6 women with 25 units of progesterone on day 21. The most common score we get back is less than 0.5. In other words, the laboratory could not find it in their sample. So that shift to that very poor production of progesterone is having an enormous impact on women. It's the hormonal basis of PMS or PMT, which is obviously swollen, congested breasts or heavy, painful, clotty menstrual periods, and then the emotional challenges that come with that. So people swing from intense irritability to immense sadness, sometimes within the same hour and sometimes without knowing what's really stimulated that. And for any woman, when you feel that you've got a kind heart, when you feel like you're reasonably intelligent, it's very, very difficult to make sense of what feels like something that is so out of control. And so, again, it's a topic I love to go into in my online seminars and in my books to help women really link what I've just explained between those stress hormones and sex hormones, because coming back and supporting those adrenal glands can be key.
Oh, absolutely. I can see that we're going to end up having a lot of people looking for the book, because it is imperative. And the scariest part, I think, is that, you know, one of the things you had said, I had read about, is that if you're functioning properly, you would not know when your cycle was happening. It would be almost like it just happens. And I've been blessed with that for years, but I wasn't years ago, where I always knew it was coming. I was erratic. I mean, the moods came. It was true PMS. I'd say I'm pre-PMS. today I don't have that, and I know it has a lot to do with the digestion and stress and exercising my mind as well as my body. So what would be some things, like before they even got the book, but some things besides the self-talk and the stress that really has to take effect to make the change? And the other question is, how long does it take for someone to even notice changes once they start implementing some of the strategies into their lifestyle?
People usually notice a difference within a couple of days based on how they feel. So they'll notice a difference to how they're feeling in a few days. But to get a change in sex hormones, it takes 1 to 2 menstrual cycles. So to put it very simply, one of the things that I'm forever working on behind the scenes is what's called our nervous system, and there are different parts to it. There's what I call the fight or flight response, or the red zone, and then the other part is it's the big long scientific name for it is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest, digest, repair, reproduce arm of the nervous system, and I call that the green zone. So we'll talk as the red zone, fight or flight, green zone, resting arm of the nervous system. And when we constantly live in that red zone, it's asking our body to be constantly on red alert, looking to save our own life. And relatively speaking, not that long ago, we constantly lived in the green zone. So we came from a very calm place, and we only ever went into the red zone when, for example, when a car drove out in front of us and we had to slam our brakes on to save our life. But now what I find is that women have actually got a scheduled time to access that green zone. And so the best way to get across into that place is through the way that we breathe. So first things first, we have to decrease the things that lead us into that red zone. We've got to decrease those. So that's being honest with yourself about how much caffeine you're having and how that's affecting you. And number 2, I mentioned earlier, beginning to explore your perception of pressure and seeing how you can begin to change that. So they're the first 2 things to come out of the red zone. But then to really stimulate the green zone, which is where we want to live, where fat burning is optimum, where energy is even, sex hormones can become balanced, the best way to access that is through your breath. And when you breathe diaphragmatically, which means you breathe in and out through your nostrils, and your lower abdomen, your tummy, goes in and out with each breath. So with the inhalation, your tummy starts to protrude, and then with the exhalation, your tummy shrinks back in. When you breathe in that way, you move your diaphragm up and down, and that communicates to every cell in your body that you're safe. You would never, ever be able to breathe in that way if there truly was a tiger right there in your face threatening you, because you wouldn't be able to pause and think, oh, that's okay, it's just a tiger, I can breathe slowly, no problem. You wouldn't do that. You would go straight into adrenaline-based breathing, which is short, sharp, shallow breaths in the top of your chest. So the fastest way to decrease stress hormones and to begin to allow your body to begin to make its own progesterone is through the way that you breathe. And I know it sounds too simple to make a difference, but it's getting really great. I like to say that the quality of our life is determined by the quality of our rituals. So we need to get really good quality rituals. And some of those rituals I encourage women to embrace is some form of breath-focused movement, whether it's Tai Chi, Qigong, restorative yoga, Pilates, anything that is breath-focused, and you can then feel that you're coming from a really calm place.
That's awesome. And I think the best analogy I've ever heard about diaphragmatic breathing is watching a baby breathe when the stomach goes up and down. And a lot of women are conditioned to keep your stomach in, and we're not. And then when you breathe the other way, you keep putting it out. So.
Exactly. Women walk around with their abdomen sort of trying to switch it on and to suck it in, not to make it move. And right. when we do that, your body's perception is that your life is in danger, and then that has an enormous ripple effect across digestion, across sex hormones as well.
Wow. And it's almost counterintuitive for some, and I can imagine, but the good examples is learning to breathe, and a lot of people don't do that. I happen to use 3-minute heart breathing and stuff as my ritual, because for me, I need to calm my head, and that does that the easiest way I could imagine without taking the time out to do the Tai Chi or Pilates or different things. And it's a quick fix for a big challenge.
And that's a beautiful way to do it. I encourage women as well, when you wake up, when a brand new day has dawned, don't just wander out to the kitchen. Throw the curtains open and place your hands just below your navel and just stand there and gaze out at your world and feel grateful to be blessed to be part of a new day, and just think of some things that you're really grateful for, and breathe diaphragmatically while you stand there welcoming a new day. That can be a really beautiful ritual for people to take up in their life.
And I think that's easy enough to apply and make it part of a day versus thinking to take away too much. But you also talked about, when you go into the red zone, from the red zone to the green zone, rest and scheduling time. So give us an idea of what time is to you.
So time can be anything, because people's perception of time is very different. We can feel like time, like we can't keep up with the world. Other people will describe to me the world can't keep up with them. But obviously for most rushing women, they feel like they have no time. They feel like there are never enough hours in the day. They feel like they've got a to-do list that's never all crossed off, and that really bothers them. And women will email me and say, I lie there at night just thinking about all the things I haven't achieved in the day that was on my to-do list. So I create a new to-do list that's got things from yesterday and last week, and then what I've got to do tomorrow. And then I put it in order, and then I can't sleep. And so it can have, that to-do list can have and not allowing ourselves to rest can also have a really big ripple effect. So resting is not necessarily about sleeping more, although that is critical, because a lot of women compromise sleep to get more done. And our biology determines that an adult needs 8 hours of sleep a night. We cannot fight that biology. But yet so many women stay up later and get up earlier trying to simply get more things done. And so that can also have an impact on our life. So sleep we must, and we must get to the heart of why we're not sleeping restoratively if we're not. So if you wake up and you're just as tired as when you went to bed, getting to the heart of that matter, again, is of such importance. I did a whole sleep online seminar recently that was so popular, and it made me really, really realise just what a massive challenge sleeping restoratively is for a lot of people. So there's more information at drlibby.com about sleep. But as far as resting goes, I encourage women to do their best to live from a resting place. We don't have to be in an amped up, wired state to be productive and get our tasks done. I want women to live from that green zone, because when you do that, you are actually coming from a resting place. And if you come out of that for whatever reason, your breath can take you straight back there. So you can be sitting at your desk and just start to activate that breath to come back into that green zone. But I personally make sure that I spend time by myself as many days of the week as possible, even if it's just for 20 minutes. It might be that I go for a walk and just observe the colour of the trees, because down under at the moment it's autumn or fall, and so the trees just look amazing. So I'll take that time out and go for a walk. Sometimes I just go over to my window and gaze out at the world. For other times I'll go to a cafe and have a herbal tea, of course, and I might sit there with my favourite book or make some notes in my journal. It's just that time away, and I'm a much better me when I do that. So that resting time doesn't have to be with your legs up the wall doing yoga poses, or you can simply guide yourself and train yourself to live from that restful place, as well as having some of those resting rituals and solitude time, if that indeed does serve you.
That's awesome. That's great examples. I actually want to ask 2 more questions before we have a listener that would like to ask one, and we're almost done, believe it or not. It goes so fast. But you also mentioned, get honest with yourself about caffeine, but I read also about sugar, where it destroys our B vitamins, and it really does a big job on us. Do you consider that part of our red zone of what's affecting us? Is that part of your studies?
Yes, absolutely, Lisa. And it's so decreasing in my ideal world, people would omit all sources of refined sugar. Obviously, I live in the same real world as everybody else, so I just simply want to encourage people to begin to notice where it appears in their life and get some strategies to change it. And it was a really big reason why I created the Real Food Chef. My cookbook was, if people want sweet food, I want people to have sweet food on hand that serves their health, that supports their health, that doesn't take away from their health. So the snacks in the Real Food Chef very much support that process. However, to to continue on this thread of the way sugar can be incredibly stimulating, but also to the nervous system and keep us in that red zone, but also can be very destructive for our health. It's sugar that people usually go back and want to keep eating. People don't, after they eat, they don't think, oh, I suddenly want more broccoli. They'll think, I want usually sweet food. And when we do that, obviously, it creates a blood glucose roller coaster. And that leads the body to then make another hormone called insulin, which can communicate to every cell in our body that we need to store fat and not burn it. So it's another one of those 9 factors. So for some people, making that decision that they're going to take a break from eating refined sugar is literally game-changing when it comes to their health.
Well, I think the easiest analogy I learned and I like to apply is if it's in a box or a can, it doesn't need to go in me, or if I can't pronounce the ingredients, it's not something I should be eating. But if it comes from the earth or a tree, it's pretty much a good choice. Just makes it easier than reading directions or ingredients.
That's exactly right. And it's why I teamed up with Chef Cynthia to create the Real Food Chef, so that people could see that having a high plant diet with plenty of vegetables and food that serves our health can just be delicious for women and also for their families.
Yeah, and I think that's great because I've turned away from the red meats and stuff like that, and I'm not necessarily a vegan as much as a pescatarian. Is that right? I eat fish. And
yes.
The interesting part is that finding the replacement for proteins was always an issue because our mind thinks we need so much, not realizing we'll get a lot of that from the vegetables if we eat the right ones too. I want to ask one last question. I want to make it open for the listeners been waiting in to ask patiently. But there's something you talk about with menopause, and I know a lot of our listeners are dealing with either, pre or post right now menopausal, and the functions of just being erratic with their hormones and not being able to function or finding remedies. Do you want to just touch on it? I know it's in the book, but you want to just touch on it for some of them?
For menopause, absolutely. So at menopause, the change obviously is that the ovaries stop making hormones, and we should then have still good adrenal production of our sex hormones, but for a lot of women, they haven't made sex hormones from their adrenal glands in a really long time because they've been churning out stress hormones. So again, the strategies that I offer in my books and in my online seminars to really support the adrenal glands can be key. So that breath, like we mentioned, the caffeine, the refined sugar, and the perceptions of pressure, so that they're all key to helping women get through menopause in a really empowered way. But the other point is that obviously heat is a really big concern for a lot of women going through menopause, and the heat can come from a decreased amount of estrogen being produced naturally. Of course, that can happen, but it can also come when the liver is what I call congested. So when the liver isn't able to do its detoxification work as efficiently as it might like, it can generate a whole lot of heat. So when I'm working with women who are experiencing a challenging menopause, I will focus very much on supporting the adrenals, but also the liver. And so again, the liver loaders are things like alcohol, caffeine, refined sugar, trans fats in processed cakes and biscuits, muesli bars and deep fried food. So really beginning to look at where the liver loaders are coming in, minimizing those. I tend to use real food. I will sometimes use herbs as well to support women to make sure that those liver detox pathways are working effectively. So the brassica family of vegetables, for example, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, they all work on what we call phase 2 liver detoxification pathways, which is critically important for great estrogen metabolism, both while women are menstruating and also through perimenopause and postmenopausally. It's the liver that makes the decision whether to excrete old estrogen or recycle it, because it's the slightly changed form of estrogen that women can start to recycle when their liver is congested, that's been so highly linked to our reproductive cancers. For some women with estrogen-sensitive breast cancer, that slightly changed form of estrogen has been found to be up to 400 times higher. So really supporting our liver detox pathways is so important, and both premenopausally and also during menopause.
I'm sure that's a topic we can do a whole hour on, and we'll have to have you back another time so we can actually expand on it. There are so many people right now, and it always goes back to the same common denominator of what you put in and what goes out. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much is associated to what we physically are putting in our bodies, and we're looking for solutions everywhere but what we're doing. So this is so valuable. Libby. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. We do have a listener who has been waiting patiently. I want to give them an opportunity if they're there. I see they're there, but can we hear you?
Me?
Yes. Okay. So what is your question for Dr. Libby?
You know what? This is the very first time that I've been told I'm probably, I feel like you're describing me. And I've overcome a lot of this stuff, but I've never heard of rushing woman syndrome. And everybody who knows me, or a lot of people who know me, tell me that I'm always rushing around. And I've had a lot of issues in the past with my hormones, my endocrinology, I can't even say it, endocrine issues, and weight issues. And I find it fascinating, that you're saying that this is all related. It's unbelievable to me.
I'm so glad that you can see how so much is joined up, and the first thing to do is to know that you've got a very beautiful heart, because you would never rush around trying to be all things to all people, and I'm sure help as many people as you do and support people in your life if you didn't care. So that's the first thing to know. I think rushing women are very beautiful people, but it is of enormous concern to me that women will try to be all things to all people and sacrifice their own health in that process. And so my book and my work is designed to help people not only support themselves physically through those through sex hormones and through all the endocrinology that you mentioned, and also with weight. It's so important to begin to decipher what is actually going on in your body so that all of those things can change. And also the psychology section in Rushing Woman Syndrome helps women understand why they feel like they have to be all things to all people.
Okay, so my real question is, because Lisa's taught me some things about dealing with food, but I haven't yet learned, or maybe it's a habit, to slow down. And I caught myself doing that this morning where I was rushing. And fortunately, I have learned to plan my food well enough that I do not make hasty choices with my food.
So what is your question specifically? Because we only have 1 minute to close.
Okay. I slow myself. What do you tell people to do to slow themselves down from rushing?
So get a breathing ritual as soon as you wake up in the morning. Hands below your navel, gaze out your window, think of 3 things you're grateful for, and breathe diaphragmatically just to start each day.
Okay.
And I will go into a lot more detail at my free online seminar on June 11. So if you go to drlibby.com / you'll find it there off the homepage, drlibby.com. You can register for the free online seminar, and I'll go into loads more detail.
And that's drlibby.com. So you can find other things on Dr. Libby's blogs, her book, Accidentally Overweight, Rushing Women's Syndrome, Guilt Food Chef, and more. So there's so much great information there. Dr. Libby, thank you so much for being an incredible guest, and I hope to have you back, and thank you for introducing the rest of the world to what New Zealand and Australia knows, but now they'll know you too here more.
Oh, Lisa, it's such a pleasure. It's my passion to share this information and really drive a ripple effect throughout the world. And thank you so much for everything you're doing to contribute to women feeling absolutely fabulous.
Well, thank you. And again, everybody, continue to follow us on findtofab.com. Follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter at Lisa Lieberman. And I look forward to our next call. Remember, you are fab, and have a fabulous day. Thank you, everyone.
This is your life talking to you. Yes, I know it's unusual. You think that you are just living your life, but now here I am. I just had to speak up if you and I are going to have the best. Yes, you've had some success with me, but you know things could be better. I know how tough it's been to fight depression and the habits that lead you to self-sabotage and disordered eating. I applaud you for all the professional and self-help remedies that you have tried so far. But let's face it, they haven't worked. But it's not your fault. I know. I was there, remember? It's time that you listen to me for a change. I want you to go to www.findtofabshow.com and find out how best-selling author Lisa Lieberman-Wang can make me your life fabulous. Right now, Lisa is offering a 10-week transformational program for us. Mention the show and we'll get a really great discount. Hey, I'd go online and do it for us, but I don't have any fingers. So go ahead and go to www.findtofabshow.com and let's make the changes we need today so we can have a better tomorrow.